Welcome to the England Rugby Pod. Thanks for downloading episode 70. It's round 3 of the 2018 Six Nations, and we give Matt Hanney of the Thistle Rugby podcast his say. You're listening to the England Rugby Pod, the rugby podcast that believes England will win the World Cup in 2019. Hey guys, welcome once again. Obviously another big weekend. It's round 3 of the Six Nations. England take on Scotland. Lots to talk about this week. Some interesting stuff coming up. But first and foremost, hello Dan.
Hello mate, how are you?
Hi, yeah, I'm good mate, I'm good. And the team's been announced just this morning. So we had a pretty good idea of what to expect, I think. But
there's no surprises, are there?
I think just there was one question mark. We put a tweet out regarding it. That was probably someone responding to it right there. And it was whether we were going to see Haskell on the bench or Underhill, really. And obviously George Cruz, we debated whether or not he might go. But I think we'll come on to it. But I think we thought that George Cruz is a backup, out and out second row. So really, it was about who was going to be the kind of the extra man to cover the back three, and he's gone with Sam Underhill, which I think is probably right. He had a cracking game last week. I mean, obviously we talked a lot about that try-saving tackle, but he is a workhorse.
He's a real workhorse, and he's a real defensive workhorse. I don't know how it's going to go this weekend. At the start of the championship, I highlighted this as perhaps one of our toughest matches, and I still believe it's a really tough match. But the more I think about it, the more it would be we'd really let ourselves down if we lost, I think.
I agree. I think that we've got something to share with everyone a little bit later on, and I think after that we can discuss our expectations and what have you at the end. But first, let's just kind of go through the team. Obviously, the front row, Mako, Dillon and Dan Cole. Dylan Hartley becomes, I think with this cap, he becomes the second most capped player in English rugby history.
He overtakes Johnny, I believe.
Yeah, so it's only what's his name? The prop,
Jason
Leonard. Jason Leonard will be the only man ahead of him, and it's interesting because Hartley's come in for a lot of criticism. We've pretty much always been on his side, and I think his record speaks for itself. But it's amazing when you think how much rugby he missed through discipline in the earlier part of his career, and how much international rugby he missed. He would be by far the most capped England player if he hadn't.
I don't think he'd have as much Leonard. But don't forget Johnny. Think how much Johnny missed through injury.
Hang on, Jason Leonard had what, 115?
I think it's more than that, isn't it?
We'll check. We'll check and confirm. But bear in mind, Dylan Hartley's getting cap number 92.
Has he missed 25, 30 matches?
I would think so, because he's had what did we work it out as 6 years worth of bans in his career or something ridiculous.
Jesus Christ, yeah, bless him.
So yeah, I think the point is this is a guy who would be, he's going to be the second most capped player ever. He would certainly be there or thereabouts, pushing for being the most capped England player ever. And given that he's clearly Eddie's man it's certainly looking that way. He's Eddie's man to start the World Cup. And with the number of caps left on the field between now and then, I think he would certainly have overtaken it if he won't anyway.
He's still got time left, doesn't he?
Yeah.
He doesn't seem to be. I mean, because you say we've backed him. I mean, I must admit I have questioned whether Jamie George should be in there, and I didn't think Dylan Hartley would last this long. I thought he might have a couple of years in him to sort of help implement the Eddie Jones culture, but it seems like there's going to be more than that, doesn't it? It seems like he could be about for a while, and I agree. I think he'll still be there World Cup.
Well, so I've just had a look while you've been talking there. So Dylan and Johnny Wilkinson are joint second at the moment on 91 caps. So this is where Dylan, obviously with his 92nd, becomes the second most capped. Jason Leonard 114.
114. Okay.
So I think Dylan would currently be the most capped England player if he hadn't been banned all those years, and I think he will probably overtake Jason Leonard. by the time he retires from international rugby. So I think, you have to say to all the doubters, this is he clearly he's achieved these caps under more than just Eddie Jones. This isn't just an Eddie Jones thing. So credit where it's due.
Yeah, I mean, hey, look, you don't get that many caps if you're not a great player. I think the difficulty is because Jamie George is such a brilliant player as well, it sort of highlights as, just brings it more to the attention. But it's not that Dylan Hartley's not capable, because he's more than capable. It's just that we're lucky to be blessed with two world-class hookers, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And the new Eddie Jones style with finishes and everything else, Jamie George right now is fitting into to that role really well, and it's becoming clearer with every game at not just England but all the teams. That last 20 minutes is key, and so you need really to be thinking about not necessarily playing your best players for the first 60, but making sure that you've got the best team possible on the pitch for that last 20.
Yeah, because that last 20 is massive. I mean, England last week didn't have a great last 20, and we saw what it did. I mean, we let Wales get very close. So
well, absolutely, which is unusual for them, for England, that is.
And Wales.
And Wales. Okay, so second row, Marrow and Joe Launchbury. That was always going to be the case. Two very solid.
We never big up Launchbury enough. I think it's because we're so used to him just being brilliant week in, week out. Well, we kind of skip over him, don't we?
We do. We talked about it briefly when we did the Launchpad episode. He's a guy that just always performs. We got a tweet in the week actually from someone saying, in our last episode, how could we not mention Joe Launchbury, best player on the pitch by a mile? He is. He's a workhorse, and it's unfortunately for him, it's just come to kind of be expected, and he delivers week in, week out. And it's kind of, I think with him, it's everything that he does. So he doesn't have those moments of magic that the media kind of grab hold of. Everything's just really, really solid throughout. I think we had our whole Awesome Foursome series. He's secured his number 5. Is he number 5? I think so. He's secured that shirt, I think.
At the moment, he's our best second row. I think his name's on the team sheet ahead of Marrow at the moment.
I would agree. I mean, that's not to say that I don't think Marrow's name's on there, but I think the thing with Maro Itoje is he's a brilliant player who's still learning and still getting better. And so what's exciting about him is, what does the future hold? And by the future, I mean the short-term one, the one between now and the start of the World Cup. I think there's going to be massive improvement from him. Whereas Joe Launchbury, he's been there and he's done it, and he's now at his peak and he's kind of staying there. So it's going to be I think the two of them are going to make for a cracking second row, 18 months from now. They already are, obviously. And obviously that kind of brings us on nicely to the back row, where Courtney Laws seems to be really cementing that number 6 shirt. Do we think that's a long-term thing?
There's something, I don't know, there's something that doesn't seem quite right about a second row and playing back row. I'm no Lewis Moody, obviously a legend of sort of a back row. I know before he said that eventually a second row will get found out at back row, and that worries me, but in fairness to Laws, he hasn't been found out yet.
I think the thing with Courtney Laws is he a second row? I know he's tall and lanky, and he's obviously pretty big as well, but is he a second row? He plays a lot of his rugby for Northampton in the back row. He's probably playing more in the back row than he is in the second row at all times.
Touché.
So, this is more as a question to you. Like, do you think that perhaps means that's the difference here?
I think he's developed into a back row. He definitely was a second row, but no, I think that's a really fair point. At the moment, he's probably played more rugby back row. The back row, when I look at it, it's so solid, but it's not your sort of rock star back row that you might get with perhaps an Ireland, if you look at that, with sort of Sean O'Brien, Amani sort of back row. Whereas, when Simmons is fit, when Billy's fit, I wonder whether there'll still be split place for Courtney Laws in the back row then.
Yeah, that's a good question. We talked a lot about. Well, I say we talked a lot. We talked last week about the fact that Sam Simmons, despite having a great game against Italy and an okay game against Wales, but sadly he's injured now. But is he a natural eight? Perhaps not. At least not for England. But in that six shirt, would that be a different story?
Well, I wonder whether they'd look at him at 7 as well.
Or 7. Yeah, sorry. I'm thinking like player for player because actually Rob Shaw. Didn't Eddie say that Rob Shaw wasn't a 7?
Yeah. He said he should never play 7. But the thing about Rob Shaw is wherever you play him, he's putting in a shift.
Yeah. And I think, when we talk about rockstar back three, Chris Robshaw has done so much for England over the course of his international career. Should we be looking at him as a bit more of a rock star than perhaps we do? I know he doesn't. He doesn't put in massive hits, and he's not like a Neil Back who's kind of in there scavenging and winning ball. But then the game's changed a bit. But you look at the stats, and that seems to be the kind of the key factor these days. He's always there. Up there or thereabouts with tackles made, with ground made, with meters run, and all the kind of the things that you want to see from your workhorses. Horses. You can't say that word; doesn't sound right. Is he an England rock star?
No.
So, who would you have ahead of him?
No, I'm not saying I'd necessarily have someone ahead of him, but so when you say rock star, you look at somebody who's perhaps who's got a bit of that sort of flair factor. Someone like a Simmons who can run in those tries. So when I mean rock star, I mean somebody with a bit of flair to the game. That's not to say that Rob Shaw's game is any less. If anything, his game's better than most because he does all that hard work. But he's never gonna sort of run through the centres and score a try. He's probably not going to make the Underhill type tackle.
No, that's true. I mean, but I suppose is that what we're seeing from the rock stars around the world? Are they doing that, or is it the fact that they're going in and they're making 10 turnovers in a game, and people are going, "Wow, that's what a world class back row player does," or a Billy who we will have back at some point, and a Nathan Hughes who's closing the gap, who are doing what they do. Billy, we know, is a rock star, so that's 1 out of 3. I don't know. I wonder whether. I think you're right. I think maybe Courtney Laws gets put under a fair bit of pressure. When we're back to full fitness, just in terms of the quality that exists. Who played back row out and out. But is Rob Shaw? If you have your rock star at 8, and let's say your rock star at 6 or 7, it doesn't really matter. Does Rob Shaw then fit into that and kind of glue it together quite nicely?
I think so. I think there's definitely still room for Rob Shaw because of everything he does. So if everyone's fit, I've got Billy at 8, Rob Shaw at 6, Simmons at 7.
Okay, well, look, that debate will obviously continue.
We digress.
And no doubt someone else, we'll probably see Rob Shaw putting the biggest hit of anyone ever this weekend, and suddenly he'll be a superstar as well. But that's our prerogative. So moving into the backs, Danny Care obviously starts at 9. Ben Young's still out injured. No surprises there. Care, Young's, they're kind of one and the same. We don't really mind which way around that goes. It is a shame not to have what Danny Care brings at 20, with 20 to go, because I don't think that Wigglesworth offers the same thing.
No, he definitely doesn't, but he does offer other stuff that perhaps Danny Care and Ben Young's doesn't have, but it's just whether we're going to need that.
Well, yeah, this is true. Obviously, Ford Farrell, 10-12. We don't need to say very much about them. The media has pretty much said it all. They seem to have a, what do the media describe it as?
The telepathic relationship.
Yeah. Well, whilst we may not go that far, the fact is that between them, the two incredible rugby kind of minds that and I guess that do benefit from knowing each other better than most. It does mean that split second decisions can result in tries like the 2 that we scored against Italy. And they really weren't. The quality of those tries wasn't because of the potential lack of quality in the opposition. It was down to just superbly executed, a superbly executed move on both occasions.
Yeah, exactly. So my issue with that whole telepathic thing, it's nothing about sort of taking away. I think the reason I've got an issue with it is I think it sort of undermines them. I think it takes away from the fact that they're both brilliant players. It's almost like, the reason it works so well is because they know each other so well, rather than saying because they're both just world-class players. World-class, Owen Farrell's best player in the world. George Ford, probably not quite world-class yet, but he's certainly got world-class aspects to his game, for sure.
I think if we look back 12 months as well, and we kind of see what's happened, George Ford is a far better player now than he was 12 months ago.
Yeah, agreed.
And he's just getting better all the time. There were lots of sort of, there was a time not that long ago where we were saying, does Farrell go in at 10 and make way for someone else, and Ford make way for someone else in the side. But I think now, world class or not, Ford is another name that's on that team sheet, early doors.
Eddie Jones has really stuck by him, hasn't he? And I think it's paying off. And I think come the World Cup, it will have paid off massively.
Yeah. and there was talk sort of end of last year, we were sort of saying, it's important to have your World Cup side, for a good 18 months before the World Cup begins. You can't be trying out new combinations and trying out new things. Now, obviously, this Six Nations, for all the sides, because of injuries, has meant that certain things have had to be tried out. And in England's case, so far, the strength and depth has shown. But there are certain players that, Mike Brown is a key example. As Eddie said last week, a lot of the media have questioned that decision. We've questioned it.
Eddie lost his shit.
I've accused him of being a vet. But Eddie has stuck with it. And there was a really interesting article from the 1014 guys on Twitter, which was an interview they'd found from a few years back, clearly, because when Eddie was head man over in Japan, where he was talking about what it takes to be an international coach and what's important. And one of the things that he said was you have to kind of stick with your guys. Yes, you've got to be prepared to make changes. You've got to put them under pressure, but you've also got to kind of make a commitment to them if you want them to make a commitment to you. And that's something I think he's probably done with George Ford.
Yeah, I think so. And the back line he's sticking with again. So we've got obviously Ford, JJ in the centres, which I think is fair enough. And actually, JJ is going to put the fear into the Scottish after what he did to him last year. And as much as people say, last year, they'll still be wary of what he can do. And they'll remember that he was skipping through their midfield like hot knife through butter. God, that's a shit expression.
Yeah, it's not your best.
It's not the best one, but so I think JJ definitely is the right option. The wings, you've got Watson, May, fair enough, Brown, fullback. Yeah, I mean it's as it should be, to be fair.
Yeah, I agree. I think the only other real sort of change is that Joe Marler has come back in. You obviously talked about thinking. You said beginning of the Six Nations that in your opinion Marler was the in-form prop, and you'd have him starting and Mako on the bench. Obviously, it's the other way around. Marler's only just back, but it'll be very interesting to see how he goes in that last half an hour or however long it is that they give him. Expecting big things from Joe, or do we think something stupid and reckless and potentially?
I don't think stupid and reckless. I guess there's a limit to the impact.
You don't think that's something he does?
He hasn't for England, in fairness. Well, other than. Yeah, okay. I'll let's ignore that one. I don't think he'll do something like that. I had an interview with him the other day where he said Eddie's losing his cool a bit with him, losing his patience a bit. So I'm pretty sure Joe Marler will keep it under wraps. But if he comes on, the Scots will be like, "Oh, for God's sake, are you kidding me?" Like, so you've got a great option to come on instead of Mako. I think Marler in the tight, in the scrums, and everything's probably offering more than Mako, but in open play, I think Mako's got more to offer. So it's great options to have.
Swings and roundabouts. I guess it does. It does make you question whether Mako is the better man to finish, just because of that impact play and that ability to be a ball carrier. But that said, you also need, England need a good start, particularly given that Scotland have failed to have decent starts in their first 2 games. England needs to take advantage of that and put them under a lot of pressure early on. So it's probably not a bad idea to have a few ball carriers early on. And we have that with Mako, we have that with Maro, and obviously the guys at the back. So the other thing I'm quite pleased about, I mentioned it last week. I don't know if I mentioned it on the pod or if it was just when we were chatting, but Sam Simmons, the one problem he seemed to have was controlling the ball at the back of the scrum. So England would often win their scrum comfortably. And then I think on 2 or maybe even 3 occasions, he kind of just kicked it back into the middle, and I think that comes from a lack of experience playing at 8. So I'm glad that we've got Hughes back and that we have an out-and-out 8 playing there this week, because hopefully that just gives us a bit more stability at the back. And it's that ability to kind of pick and go from the 8 position, knowing how to do that and being used to doing that, giving us the extra man out wide.
So here's the thing. So Hughes is back. It seems like he's been for a fairly intensive sort of fitness regime, but I doubt whether he'll last 80. So realistically, Robshaw's going to go to 8, isn't he? Because we don't have anyone else.
I would think Robshaw goes to 8.
And then we'll probably get Underhill on at 7.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is fine.
I think that's exactly what will happen. But look, let's wait and see. These guys are pretty tough. Hughes might be like having the game of his life and leave him be. There's obviously the option, depending on how the second row guys are going, there's the option of bringing Laws on and moving Maro. Not that he's an 8, but I think you're right. I think what we'll see probably is Hughes bowing out for 20 minutes and Robshaw moving to 8. But I guess a lot will depend on where the game is, because if it's a tight game, you probably want to tell Nathan Hughes to suck it up for an extra 20 minutes, because Robshaw it might be a workhorse, but he's not a natural 8.
No, yeah, I mean it's a tough one because Hughes is your go forward man, isn't he? He's your heavy traffic, as I believe they call it. He's one that tears up trees.
He is. That's a fine.
That is a fine.
Do we think Tio will come on for? This is just it'll depend on how the game's going. But Tio comes on for JJ or for Ford? Obviously not. If he comes on for Ford, Farrell moves to 10, Tio at 12.
I think it depends what JJ's doing.
Absolutely, no. Obviously, but and obviously what Ford's doing is if he's having the game of his life, then you're not going to want to make changes. But just so, this is more of you're making a gamble. You're just guessing.
I'm going to say JJ.
Okay.
Because
Ford and Farrell are telepathically going to run the game, and you don't want to break that. You don't want to break that connection.
You don't want to take that away from them. Their Mystic Med connection. So you want to keep that going, right?
Yeah, you absolutely do. Right. Well, look, the next thing, and I don't think there's anything else specifically that we want to talk about, other than the England game. So unless you've got anything else, I think the next thing to do is go to an interview that we've just done with Matt Hanney. I think it's Matt Hanney, wasn't it? Who's from the Thistle Rugby podcast. That's the Scottish Rugby podcast. We interviewed him, or I say we interviewed him. We had a chat with him, which we recorded. Just to get some insight. We thought it'd be nice to get some insight from the guys who are doing what we're doing, but on the other side. And here's what he had to say. Hey guys, joined by Matt Hanney today from the Thistle Rugby podcast. That's the Scottish Rugby pod. We thought today would be a great day for us to kind of come together and have a chat with them, obviously with the England game against Scotland on Saturday, or the Scotland game against England on Saturday. So Matt, welcome.
Thanks so much, guys.
So, Matt, Dan here. Obviously, Scotland have had a mixed start to the Six Nations. And, I mean, obviously, both of us are going to be coming at this from different angles. But what do you rate Scotland's chances on Saturday against England?
I'd like to say, at the start of the tournament, coming in off the back of a really good autumn, I would say that it would have been a good chance to beat England. But obviously, that sort of complete self-destruction at the hands of the Welsh, I sort of paid a lot of optimism that I think most Scots fans had for this tournament. There was a chance that we could have lost against France, and that would be a complete disaster. I think we would be going for a wooden spoon at that point. But coming off the back of a win does improve our chances. And while if I was betting man, I would put my money on England to win. You never know at home, and I still think that if Scotland do click like they did in the autumn, particularly against Australia and New Zealand, then there is a possibility.
Yeah, I mean, I remember at the start of the tournament, when Andy and I were chatting, we actually highlighted this match as potentially one of England's toughest matches, with it being in Murrayfield, like you say, with the results that you had in the autumn internationals. But there must be some questions. I mean, Finn Russell, who, let's face it, is an absolute quality player, but he's had a really poor tournament. I mean, how concerned are you about his form going into this match?
Yeah, a bit of a mixed one there. I'm a big fan of Finn, as most Scottish fans, rugby fans are, I think. But the first two games, he's been really poor. He can be quite a sort of inconsistent player, but he hasn't sort of shown those flashes of brilliance, I don't think, so far. And when it comes to Six Nations Championship rugby, you need that control, and so far he hasn't brought any of that. And without Laidlaw against France, for example, that game could have been a lot more difficult. On the other side of things, though, Finn is a confidence player and he likes to sort of pull a rabbit out of the hat. So you never know that if he sort of pitches up and the pressure's on. I think that's actually where he thrives quite a lot. He's even said when he's goal kicking, for example, he prefers to take the more difficult shots from the touchline. So he's that kind of player. He's got that bit of arrogance. It's just whether that sort of rolls over into complacency and taking things for granted, I suppose.
As Scottish rugby fans, is he still your man come Saturday? Obviously, there was a lot of chat, following the changes.
Well, I mean, Townsend just named his team a few hours ago, and he is in there again. So the thing about Scottish rugby is you only have two pro teams to pick from, and standoff has been a problem issue for quite a few years, and there's not really anyone else behind him. So that's a bit of a difficulty in itself, that you can't sort of put a bit of pressure on him and say there's someone right behind. So, yeah, I think for the moment, he's by far our best option.
Yeah, I mean, that's obviously one of the huge advantages that England have, isn't it? Is the strength in depth that's probably always been there, but that's really kind of apparent now that Eddie's in charge. And the fact that there doesn't seem to be any positions that are, outright owned by anybody. Everyone is under pressure. Which is obviously a huge advantage.
So Matt, what do you think? So we're saying obviously sort of we've talked about sort of, yes, there might be a chance if it comes right. How does Scotland beat England on Saturday? What do they need to do to win this match?
Yeah, I think that if Scotland can get parity up front, I don't think they're going to bully the England pack. I don't think that's probably ever happened in the history of the Calcutta Cup. But if they can get parity, get some sort of form of decent ball, even for a few chances, then and providing the guys like Finn, Hugh Jones, Seymour and Hogg, are playing well, then they can cause any team in the world a lot of problems. So, and I think that if you've got parity, then Scotland actually perhaps have some more sort of exciting, dynamic strike runners than England in the backs.
I'd agree with that.
So if that's a big if, but if we are going to win the game, then I think that'll be where it happens. I think that maybe picking up the pace a bit as well, but we tried to do that against Wales without getting any sort of platform. So the onus is really going to be on the forwards to sort of front up a set piece and at least compete well at the breakdown. So. Yeah, slim chance. I think that's where it'll be won.
Yeah, I mean, I'm inclined to agree. So, looking at Scotland and looking at the way they play, if you're playing with quick ball, like you say, you've got some great strike runners. Where I struggle to see, and where I think England are going to get the edge, is up front, the front five. I just can't see how Scotland are going to sort of have enough sort of domination in that area to enable the quick ball, to enable the width out wide. I mean, what can Scotland do to counter the England front five? Because it is a bit of a beast of a front five with some quality players in there.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's a few positions, like maybe Johnny Gray needs a big game, and I think if he's playing at his best, then he can do a lot to stem the tide. And Stuart McInally, hooker, who probably not a lot of people have heard of, but he's sort of having his maiden proper season as an international hooker, and he's been one of our best players. And I think that he's probably as good a player as Dylan Hartley, if not better. I think also that in the first two matches so far, our back rows have been outplayed at the breakdown, which isn't something I think we expected with guys like Johnny Barclay and Hamish Watson in there. But we know that those two can pull out really good performances. So if they can sort of force a few turnovers or at least slow down the ball, then that hopefully negates a bit of the power game that England clearly have.
Is that first sort of 15, 20 minutes going to be pretty key? Because obviously, from a Scotland point of view, these last two games, you guys have been behind, I think, 10 points against Wales and 15 against France, or vice versa, in the early stages. And England, obviously, notoriously quite slow out of the blocks as well. Is it going to be quite key who gets that quicker start? Because I imagine that, any side, but England's a pretty big beast to take on if you've gifted points at the beginning, particularly when they only seem to get stronger as the game goes on. It seems like it's quite a key area, that first 20.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, we've had two poor starts so far, but if we can get some sort of parity in the first 10, 15 minutes, then, the crowd comes into the equation a bit. I think that, if we give away the lead like we did against France, England are a far better team than France in terms of their physical fitness and sort of mental durability. So they wouldn't give up a lead like France did. It just seemed to completely crumble. To be fair, which is what happened against Wales, who went 14-0 down, and there was absolutely no coming back. So, hopefully it's not a repeat of the first two matches. And yeah, that first 10, 15 is going to be crucial.
And hopefully not a repeat of, well, from your guys' point of view, hopefully not a repeat of last year.
Yeah, I was wondering how long it was until you were going to bring that up. But,
that wasn't Twickenham, to be fair.
Yeah, exactly. But that was kind of similar again in terms of Scotland were coming off a few good wins. There was a bit of optimism, I suppose. And that is the hope that kills you as a Scottish rugby fan. So
yeah, well, I
think you just got to lower your expectations as much as possible.
I mean, yeah, I think just from watching the game over the years, and it seems that in the past, England against Scotland, from a Scottish point of view, was almost like the rest of the tournament doesn't matter, as long as we can get a scalp there. But it seems like that's changed a lot, which is obviously great from a Scottish rugby point of view. Scotland backing themselves just as a rugby nation more perhaps than it came across in the past. Do you think that's a fair?
Yeah, definitely. I think for quite a long sort of depressing period, it was each Six Nations was deemed a success if Scotland beat Italy and maybe nicked a home win against England, possibly France. We didn't beat Ireland and Wales for a long, long time, or they were very rare. But I think the Scottish team has evolved and it has got a lot better. Two home wins last year, three, sorry. And I think that the minimum expectation has been increased quite a bit. So I think it is a different Scotland team, but at the same time, all the other home nations in particular have got far better. So it's quite difficult still to compete with Wales, Ireland, and England, because they are bloody good teams.
Yeah, exactly. So just one sort of final question. So obviously Greg Laidlaw last week had a great showing. What are you? Are you Team Laidlaw or Team Price?
It's a really tough one. And I'm sure it's a really tough one for Townsend, because he said stall out by saying that he wants Scotland to play the fastest brand of rugby in the world, which, I think makes sense given the strike runners and maybe not having the biggest pack. But tried that against Wales and got decimated. I think if you play that way in the Six Nations, you're going to struggle. So you bring back Laidlaw to shore things up, but then you maybe have to play a slightly different style of rugby. On our podcast, the three of us, and I think two the other guys aren't big fans of Laidlaw, but I still think he's got a lot to offer. And I still think his goal kicking is really important, his leadership in particular. But I do get the question marks over his actual sort of scrum half playing ability.
Yeah, he was watching the Claremont over the weekend. He didn't really seem that interested at all, which fair enough because he's got a massive game coming up this weekend. But for me, I think that's a key area. I think I think Laidlaw can control the game, like you say. His goal kicking is an absolute must, and I think currently he's still statistically the best in the world, or certainly up there, isn't he?
Yeah.
So that's important. So okay, final question: score prediction for Saturday.
I think England will win by 15.
Oh wow! Okay, I had England at 7, but I appreciate your comment.
And I always like to go big, so I'll probably go England at 20. But that's just because I just tend to do that.
I think that's a good prediction as well. To be fair,
it's one of those games. It's what I was saying about that first 20 minutes. I think it's going to be key. It's whether or not if Scotland get out of the blocks and can get ahead or certainly be right in there. As the game starts to open up, I think it'll be interesting. I think if they are slow out of the blocks as they have been in the first couple of games, it could be a difficult one.
Great. Well, Matt, thanks so much for your time. We really appreciate you sort of coming on and having a chat to us. We're both massive fans of Thistle Rugby Pod, and we wish Scotland all the best for Saturday, but obviously
not all
the best of a losing result.
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah.
Yeah. Cheers. Thanks so much for having me on.
Cheers, Matt.
Bye. Well, that was obviously interesting, Dan.
He knows his stuff, doesn't he? He's really knowledgeable. Certainly around the Scottish rugby. It's actually something I'd recommend, guys. If you're a Scotland fan, but listen to that Thistle Rugby podcast. It's a really good podcast. The three guys, they're very knowledgeable. It's very sort of rugby centric, as I guess a rugby podcast should be. But
what gave it away? Yeah.
But no, he's a good guy. He's a very honest guy as well, isn't he? I think we hold a lot more bias than he does. Whereas
massively. I was quite surprised. I thought that he would, be that sort of consummate, unprofessional. Scotland for the win. We're at home. It's going to happen. We're going to do the English. Which would have been perfectly reasonable given that they're doing what we're doing on the other side. But no, he was, as you say, he was a lot more pragmatic, a lot more honest. And, what did he say there? He said 15, England by 15, which I thought was quite generous. It makes me question whether Scottish fans are quite as confident as they're making out. Something interesting that I read in the week, was that a lot of Scottish fans had been hyping Scotland up because of the results in the autumn, to the point where the Scotland players almost believed the hype, and that's why when they went to Wales, it was almost as if they thought, we've got this because everyone's telling us we've got it, and obviously it didn't happen. They then go away and they beat France, and fair play to them because they did it from 10 or was it 15 points behind or something. Very much a Laidlaw win. That Greg Laidlaw came on and just steadied the ship, didn't he?
It shows what influence he does have on that team. I mean, people question him, but what he adds on top of his ability as a player just seems monumental for Scotland. I mean, I think Scotland would be foolish not to have Laidlaw in and around the camp, sort of, and on the pitch as much as possible, which they are doing. So,
well, they're starting, aren't they?
Yeah, he's starting.
So I think my worry with that, if I was a Scottish fan, is that I think Laidlaw is good for grinding out a win, and I'm not sure that's the way Scotland needs to attack England.
I think they need the control, because I think England up front are going to look to massively dominate. England are going to look to put so much shit on Finn Russell because he's not had a great Six Nations so far. His confidence might be down, so they are going to look to absolutely brutalise him. So having a Laidlaw who's just got that bit more control, that bit more calm, I think initially is probably what Scotland need. Because what Scotland can't afford to do is almost to do what they did against Wales. And so it's all very well, quick ball. But if you're not building the platform for quick ball, you're just sending out quick ball wide to have a defence, and there's no point to it, and it will get exploited, and England will be England will do it without mercy or pity, and will absolutely dominate them if that happens. So I think Laidlaw is the right man to start, to control them when needs be, to kick it, to play the territory game.
That's what he does so brilliantly, isn't it? And particularly with the points from the boot. England, I think one of the key. See, I think the problem with having Laidlaw on is that the way that he controls the game relies on getting penalties. If teams discipline is, if the opposition is discipline is poor, Laidlaw will kick kicks all day long and just keep the scoreboard ticking over. But obviously, if England can sort out their discipline and just not give away the penalties, then Scotland won't have they won't be ticking over that scoreboard. So what do they do then?
Well, then they're in trouble. That's the reality of it. I think the only way Scotland can win this is to take every point they can get, to just keep building the score. Scotland are not going to dominate England. That's the reality of it. Scotland are a great team. They've got some absolute quality flair players who can make a try out of nothing. But that's great for one-offs. They're not going to, they're not going to get 4 or 5 of them.
Right.
So,
as we now know, England have quality players who can save a try out of nothing. So
they certainly do.
It does then become quite 50-50, doesn't it? It's interesting. So essentially, what you're saying is that Eddie Jones is going to be in there in camp, saying to these guys, "Look, if you can go and have the perfect disciplinary game, don't give away any penalties, or give away."
Did you do what Wales did to us last week?
Oh, 100%. But I think sorry to say it, any Welsh people listening, I'm sure there aren't very many, but I think any team in the world that does that wins, except apparently Wales last week or 2 weeks ago, because it was a phenomenal effort, and in this day and age, with how important points are, from penalties, to give away only 2. Like you say, I don't know where Scotland, without just individual moments of genius, I don't know where Scotland are gonna be running in tries from against England, just with the English defence the way it is. And so, as you say, they're going to rely on punishing poor discipline from England. And if England can give away 2 penalties all game, I think Scotland are looking maybe at 6 points.
Yeah, I don't see England only giving away 2 though. England's penalty count is higher than it should be, to be fair.
I mean, I think against so Wales gave away 2, and we were all sort of saying how incredible that was. I think England, to be fair, only gave away 12 in the game, and that's
quite a lot.
Well, but as Sir Clive said, you want to be targeting under 10. So theoretically, he's saying 9 is okay. So 3 penalties too many. Which obviously, against when you're comparing that to 2 penalties on the other side, is kind of made even worse. But it's nearly there. I mean, I'm sure there was a game a few years back where England gave away 20 plus penalties.
England can give away silly penalties sometimes, and you're right. You want to target the single figures because, 2 in a game is just not sustainable. That was just a ridiculously brilliant effort from the Welsh, but it's not sustainable. England do need to keep that down because the more penalties they give away, and Laidlaw is, as we mentioned in the chat with Matt, Laidlaw's a great kicker, and he will kick them, he will punish. So we need to make sure that we're not giving them that opportunity. And then if they're not getting that opportunity, I can see us running away with it. But if we give them that opportunity to keep them in the game, that's where the game gets difficult. And then all it takes is a Stuart Hogg moment of genius, and suddenly Scotland could find themselves in front.
Let's hope it doesn't come to that. Who's our ref?
No idea, actually.
I'm going to check. Think of something to talk about. Entertain our listeners while I check.
The ref, do you think? I'm not sure how much in-depth knowledge we have of a ref. Nigel Owens. I would have said Wayne Barnes, but he's English, so it definitely won't be him.
Oh, well, in that case, you will be pleased to hear it's Nigel Owens.
He's such a quality ref.
There's been a lot of chat about him supposedly having a poor Six Nations, but I think what I like about him is that he makes calls, he backs himself,
Yeah.
When it's a 50-50 call and he just makes it, it's going to piss somebody off. But I kind of like that. He owns the decision rather than a lot of other referees. To be fair, like 2 weeks ago against Wales, they just they palm off the responsibility of making a decision on the TMO, and I just don't think I like. Often you'll see him, ask the TMO for whatever it is he's asking him for, and then as the thing comes up on the screen, he actually says, "Do you know what? I don't need your help anymore. I've seen what I need to see, and I'm making the call."
Yeah,
and I quite like.
I really like that.
So let's hope that any decisions like those go our way, and that he. I think more importantly that he just allows for a nice flowing game of rugby, and it's not constant stop start, because it's going to be a cracking game if that happens. And I think Scotland. I think so. An important point I want to make before we kind of close this off. Lots of chat about Scotland and how much they've improved, over the last couple of years. England have done the same thing. All that improvement from Scotland is they're going to face an England side that's been improving for that same period of time as well. And I think it's important not to forget that yes, Scotland might be improving, but so are the guys that are coming up to Murrayfield to play them. So it should be a cracking game. Hopefully it'll be another cricket score, just because they're always fun to watch, even if not quite so entertaining from a neutral's point of view. But that's okay. That's what we want to see. England put 60 on them, and then have them do their comeback against Ireland. That would be nice.
Yeah, I think we'd be lucky to put 60 on them. But
of course, I
actually think it's going to be. I think it's going to be quite close.
Like
Six Nations.
7 points.
Six Nations. It goes out the window.
7 points you've gone with.
Yeah, I've gone with 7. You went with 20.
I was being polite. I'm going 26.
26. So far, it's 2-0 to me, isn't it?
Yeah, it's probably 3-0 after this, but yes, 26 is what I'm going with. That's 26 point difference. Yeah. Bearing in mind that we've established that England are only going to give away 2 penalties, Scotland are going to score them both, and that's going to be all their points for the game. England just need 20.
Oh,
so it's actually not.
Well,
not
no, because then that would only be 14.
Oh yeah, sorry, yeah.
Good maths.
26. Good. Anyway, moving on. Okay, look. Before we come to an end, then last thing: Wales, Ireland, or Ireland versus Wales in Dublin. What do you think?
I think Ireland have got that. I think Wales will give them a good game. I think it'll be close, but I think Ireland have got it. Do you know what? I want Ireland and England to showdown for the Grand Slam.
Yeah, I agree. Eddie probably wants it to. Eddie wants the best side. He wants to be playing for the win because it makes it knockout rugby.
Exactly.
And that's the best training. We don't want to go into it knowing that we can win even if we lose, because that's happened before and it's shit.
I'll tell you the game that could be interesting: France, Italy. France are without 8-9 players because they were.
Well, no, but hasn't that basically just all been rescinded? I'm sure I read that they've only made 5 changes from the team that played Scotland. So
they've certainly dropped a few players.
But I think in the wake of the incident, it was made out that he wouldn't stand for any of it, and 12 people had all been sent home, and a complete shake-up. And now it seems like it's okay. You've learnt your lesson now. A couple of you are dropped because you're not good enough, but you 5 are back.
I wonder whether he would have been willing to take that stance if France had been playing England this weekend. Oh, something tells me not quite.
No chance. Well, Bastero's back. He's been called up.
Yeah, apparently going out is out of order, but homophobia is absolutely.
Yeah, that's fine. You guys went out. Well, to be fair, I think it was a bit more than going out. Weren't they accused of rape? We're not going to get into it or that because
I believe everything was cleared. I believe they've got nothing to answer to, but
so maybe that's what it was. Maybe he did drop them until a decision had been made, and once they were cleared, he was like, okay, fair enough. Those of you who are good enough, come on back.
Let's not walk down this road.
Anyway, okay, so okay, well then, but results-wise, you're going Ireland for the Ireland-Wales game, and what you think Italy can turn France over? I don't think so.
I think France will sneak a win, but I think it'll be close.
I think the results have made France look worse than they are. I actually think France are better than they're being given credit for. Certainly they were with their full side. Whatever I don't know what the new side's going to look like. France doing what France do, changing things up massively to fix a problem that I'm not convinced is necessarily there. But we could argue that all day, because equally I read an article that said that actually the only reason France were in any of those games was because of the genius of Teddy Thomas. Yeah. Which is probably a fair comment, because the guy seems to be a bit of a genius.
He's pretty useful, isn't he?
Right. Well, look, on that cheery note, let's call it a day. We will obviously be back on Saturday to bring you all of the usual. And go England.
Absolutely, and I apologise to the listeners if I'm drunk during my half-time and full-time chat. I'm going to be out and about on the beers for Coop's birthday, so I may be fairly lively, but I will still be there, and we will still be doing our game day pod.
And if you guys don't hear Dan's voice, it's because he was too drunk and we had to find someone else.
Yeah, fair enough.
Cool. All right, guys. Look, thanks for joining us again. Hope you enjoyed the episode. Join us again on Saturday. And yeah, stick with us throughout the Six Nations. Share the love, as always. Get in touch with us on Twitter at England Rugby Pod. Same on Facebook. And the website www.englandrugbypod.com. And please, thanks to those of you that have already done it, get a chance on iTunes. You can rate us and review us. Hopefully, all 5 stars. We've had a couple of negative ones. I think people got confused, clicked the wrong button. But get on there and let us know what you think. That would be fantastic. And thanks for listening.